Hey, what's up guys, this is Alex and I'm back at you with a new tutorial about how to write orchestral music by ear without getting lost. Today we're going to talk about 4 tips on how to write music that sounds uplifting, happy, and expressive. Now, we have here the example for this tutorial is the Sonic cover I published last week, and I'm going to play it now so you can hear what type of music we're going to dissect today together. So it sounds something like this. Before we start analyzing this track, I want to say 2 things. So the first thing is that I just finished uploading the stems of this track on Patreon. So if you want to get this, like the audio files of all the single instruments, so you can analyze the orchestration yourself, you can get the stems on my Patreon page. Link is in the description of this video. And you're going to find all the stems to all of my tracks that are released so far as well. The second thing I want to talk about is why writing happy music is actually tougher than it sounds. Okay, the problem with happy music is that differently from sad or epic or dramatic music, if you write happy music in a way that is like cheaply arranged and cheaply orchestrated, it is not elaborated, your track is gonna sound cheesy as hell. And that's not very good. Because what you want with happy music or music in general is to overwhelm the listener with emotions so strong that he cannot help but feel in the music. So when you're writing happy music, you need to write something that makes the listener smile and feel happy himself, despite of who he is. So with sad music, that's way easier to do. With happy music, it entails 4 things. So the first thing you need to have actually is simplicity. And because your music needs to, usually for happy music, it needs to be easy enough to listen to it, to the point that you can really get in tune with the song, even if you don't know it. So simplicity is important, but simplicity doesn't need to to bore the listener. So you also need to have details into that simplicity, which is the second aspect of a happy music. Very fundamental. The third aspect is that you also need to make it sound energetic and alive to really get in the listener's bones and to make him or her smile. So you need to have a good sense of rhythm and all those things to bring the energy. And fourth thing is that you want contrast. You don't always want, the song to always sound happy all the freaking time. It's okay if you have in between major chords, you have some minor or diminished chords and something that sounds dark for an instant and then it goes back up, That sense of contrast is gonna keep that dynamic sense of energy and happiness alive throughout the track. If you instead want to write sad music, you still need these 4 pillars, but you can do even without them and still get a nice result. With happy music, if you don't have these 4 things, I find it sounds cheesy. The problem is that these 4 things require you to have a nice understanding of arranging and orchestration, but we're going to talk about this in this tutorial. Now, let's talk about the first pillar or tip, simplicity. Now, to achieve simplicity, I'm going to refer to what's happening in the intro. Let's check out the melody in this intro. Basically, simplicity, in this case, the main melody, it plays only 3 notes. That's why it's easy to remember. And another reason why it's easy to remember is that it has the same rhythmical pattern over and over. This is something I talk about in my tutorial, how to write great melodies and counter melodies by ear. If you missed that tutorial, it's going to talk about this subject way more in depth than I'm going to do it here, so you can check it out on my channel. But basically, here we're only using 3 notes, A, B, C. And it's the same rhythm over and over and over again. It has a pattern. So even if the order of the notes change, we're keeping the rhythm the same pattern. That's what prevents us from getting lost while listening to this melody. Another example of that is probably the main melody on the woodwinds in this second part. It has way more than 3 notes in this case, but we still follow the same pattern over and over again. That helps with simplicity. Now, if you're struggling with writing melodies that sound simple, one thing you can do actually is to listen. And I know this will come as a shock, because maybe if you're a virtuoso, if you're someone who really loves to listen to lots of music, chances are you listen to some pretty dark music, you know, some prog metal and all those things. But there's a genre of music that revolves around simplicity and does it in a way that makes it sound amazing. It's very elaborated, and it's called pop music. What I wanted to do is I know they're not virtuosos like Steven Wilson is, but really listen to Coldplay. Listen to Coldplay's Life in Technicolor, Viva La Vida, and maybe Every Teardrop is a Waterfall. Check out those songs, listen to the instrumentation, and really analyze the melodies and all those things. It's going to lead you to really develop a certain ear for simple melodies. Also, another great artist is Owl City. His song Fireflies or his song Galaxies are great examples of simplicity, in my opinion. So check out those artists and try to listen to more pop music to internalize the way they write melodies, because that really helps with simplicity. We're going to talk about chords a bit more on the 4th tip, but now let's talk about the 2nd, details. So if you have simplicity in your songs, you have a simple chord, you have a simple chord progression, a simple melody, what you need to do in order to make those simple things sound okay and interesting is add details. So I have an example here in this project file of what this intro would sound if I removed all the details. And I'm gonna play it now. Let me know if it sounds good to you. Did that sound good? Or did it feel like it was a bit empty, lacking of something that you don't know what it is, but you feel the lack of it? That something is details, are details. The normal version sounds like this. Now let's go over what was missing. And now the problem is what I called copy-paste mentality. In the version without details, I just copy-pasted the whole thing over and over. And that's the biggest hurdle or mistake or struggle we have as beginners when we start to compose is this. We tend to write something that sounds okay, and then we copy-paste the whole thing through for an entire 2 minutes or something like that. And that is what makes your music sound dead, sound like it's being performed by machines and not humans, because humans will never play that way. So, details. Let me talk about what was missing. So I'm going to go through each instrument group to show you what I mean. So for example, in the strings, we have sort of like sorry, in the cellos and the basses, we have this. There are these holes, right? That in the non-detailed part, the non-detailed version, they're not filled with anything. But when, like, as a way to make them less boring, I decided to add some notes in between the holes in the normal version. So it's not bum, bum, but it's like bum, ba-bum, ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-bum. So that's something you can do by using multiple articulations. So in this case, I used, some sustains or marcatos that alternate each other with some staccato notes like this. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Those are staccatos. If you use multiple articulations that way to fill the holes and stuff like that, that's gonna give you lots more edge. Like it's gonna give your instruments lots more edge and lots more. It's gonna give them more life. So that's one thing I see beginners not do. And in all my private feedback sessions, all my private lessons I always notice that I always tell people you should use more articulation, you should use more details. So the thing you need to do is to listen to the song, check out where the holes are, and try to ask yourself, what could I add into this hole? And also I'm gonna talk about that later a bit more, but you can also create some nice fills. We're going to talk about that in the percussion. But yeah, for the strings, we have the sort of ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-bam stuff going on. And we also have this. This is what we call a run. This is, and I'm going to talk about this a bit more in the Woodwinds tutorial. But basically, it's like this sort of scale with this sort of pattern that gives you that sort of ascending tone. It's like a riser or something, and we even have it here. So I like to use it as a transition of sorts, or a fill, and that just eases you into the next repetition of this part. So we still have a bit of copy paste because there are things that are repeating themselves, but they are contoured with some runs and with some notes that fill the holes. So the strings with details sound like this. Compared to, those strange silences. And that's just for the strings. Now, I added details on every single instrument. For example, in the brass, we have this sort of thing too. And it keeps the energy alive. It makes you can hear it in those short notes that I'm trying to convey more energy to the whole thing. And when you hear that on strings, you hear that on brass, and on percussion a little bit. That just creates great energy. We also have this sort of like runs on harps as well. I use them pretty much before every repetition. And in this second part instead, what we have to give more life to the whole thing is first, one thing I should say, we also had it before on percussion. Sorry, I'm getting lost here because there's so many things to address. Basically, on the percussion, we also have some very interesting cymbals going on. So these guys, if I remove them from the percussion, it's like what? It doesn't open up like that without cymbals. So who's using cymbals, taiko rolls, and stuff like that to open up the track during a transition is a great thing you might want to do. And I do that a lot in my orchestral tracks. It really helps. So yeah, in this second repetition, we have, other than the main melody being repeated once again, and other than having the runs and all the cymbals and all those and etc., I decided to add a new counter melody, which you can hear on French horns. Like you really, while you listen to this song the first time, you feel this thing rising in the second part, and it's this second melody. Another thing I did is I added this other articulation, which is called scoop. It's that gives them, a more energetic feel to this new melody. Or even here in the beginning, I think we have some scoops. This. So, using all those articulations that are great for transitions is a great idea. Another example of detail can be heard in the strings in this part here. This whole string ostinato here is just there to provide more energy, and it's a very little detail. But if I take it out, maybe you're gonna hear it's not as energetic without it, right? So even having sort of ostinatos and stuff like that rise and higher can really help. And that's something I discovered while writing my Cuphead cover, where I did a similar thing, and it really helped there. So I'm gonna use it here as well, because it just keeps the tension rising in a very organic way. So having those details or not having them is the difference between having something that sounds professional and having something that sounds amateur-ish, because every amateur can write, a decent song, but adding details is a thing that you really learn how to do the more you compose music. Now, the thing you need to think about is not like, composing something that has details into it from the get-go. What I do is I compose the basic idea. So the thing you heard before, the ugly rendition of the intro is what I composed first. And then on what I composed, on top of that, in the holes, I added the details. So really start with the main outline first. It's just like the way artists, like graphical art painters and all those guys, paint. They paint the outline first, which is very ugly. But then after the outline makes sense, they fill the holes. That is what you need to do with the details. You need to, write the basic stuff and then fill the holes. And then if you find new holes to fill those holes. And if you find, stuff like call and response that you can apply those. But those are things you really think about after sketching the main bit. So don't be discouraged if your song sucks at the beginning because it's not detailed. Every song does, and you can check it out on this song. I made a video where I pretty much recorded the process of writing this entire song from scratch. You can find it on my YouTube channel, and on Patreon, you're gonna find the rest of the videos there. And you can see there that this song initially didn't sound so great. But the more you work on it, the more you fine-tune, the more details you add, the more it sounds professional, and that's what you want. Always spend time filling the voids in your track. Okay, the third pillar or third tip is having energy in your music. And if you took care of details, you might have a nice degree of energy already. But the thing that you can capitalize on to create even a bigger, sense of energy is having nice rhythms. Rhythms are something that you can take care of with percussion. Sorry, that wasn't intended, but you can take care of that with percussion or with short articulations like staccato strings and all those things. And the things we're going to discuss here to create great rhythms are things I talked about in the tutorial how to write epic percussion and on the tutorial how to write epic staccato. Basically, what you can use and make use of to create nice rhythms, nice sounding percussion is, of course, layering, but also syncopated notes and fills. So, for example, a good percussive pattern will be the one that we have here. This doesn't necessarily sound like copy-paste. There's a bit of variation, but there is a bit of sense under that variation. And there's also syncopated notes. So, with syncopated notes, so to explain that to you, I'm going to split notes in accents and syncopated notes. I'm not sure that's the right terms, but that's how I call them. So the accents are these green notes that we have here. So I'm going to take all the purple notes and pink notes and remove them. What we're left here with are the accents, these guys. they are pretty much the leaders of the rhythms. Those are the most important notes in the rhythm throughout the whole song. These green notes, when the green notes play, it's usually like the part where all the rest of the instruments are resonating on that note, etc. So they're just the outliers, the guys who lead the rhythms. But we also have the syncopated notes, which are smaller notes. I left them lower in volume. They're also on thinner percussion usually, but they are in between the accents and they give that extra sense of rhythm. And it's these guys. But if we take them without the accents, they don't make sense. But if we put them now with the accents, so instead of a bam, 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 it's like right? So having those sort of thinner notes in between and changing their velocity like this really helps. Another thing you can do is before a repetition is to add some nice fills with the syncopated notes. Like here, if I remove that, it's not gonna be as good. Feels kind of weird, right? While with this, we have this feel that kind of enforces the rhythm before the repetition. And here we also have a cymbal that comes in, if I'm not wrong. No, I was wrong, sorry. But yeah, we also have a feel at the end, I think, of that pattern. This one. So the feel is both in the accents and on the syncopated. So the accents do pam pa pam pa pam pa pam pam pa 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 pam, right? That pa 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 pa, that's a feel. And with feel, I mean something that breaks the pattern, the percussive pattern, and enforces the energy. You feel that, when you hear, rock music, there's the drummer. Sometimes he might do some nice feels, and that's why some parts of the song, like really, like you can feel, oh my God, something's about to change because there's some, hats and stuff or snare feels. You need to do that in your percussion as well. And using both syncopated notes and accents in the feel can be a great thing, like I did here. So it's like da 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 da, stuff like that, right? Instead of doing pa 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 pa, you have the tra tra, those sounds in between. And it's very weird to talk about them like that, but that's how I think about that. Now, you don't want the machine gun effect. So you need to keep a velocity variable, because if I did something like, keeping the same velocity over and over on the entire snare pattern, it would sound weird, very weird. It's like, no. This is much better because it creates like differences in volume and it accentuates the rhythm. This is true for the string staccatos as well. Now in this piece in particular, the strings are not too aggressive, so the staccatos are kind of gentle, but we have them. Mostly I use them as layers to the melodies themselves to enforce a bit of rhythm and to enforce the melodies themselves too. So in this part, there are some second violin staccatos which are enforcing the counter melodies, but they're doing so with this sort of rhythmic pattern here. Yeah, this one. So it's what I told you before, right? Having, cool accents and syncopated notes in between, and also having feels. Here we have this sort of feel. Same feel at the end, and we also have a bit of, staccatos, I think, in the shallows. Just to enforce the main melody. And in here, as I showed you before, we have a full, rising and falling sort of like staccato pattern on the violins. But before we had that. And this is actually a great example of having a feel. Like, for example, here you have this single voice. So it's not only bam, 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 but it's bam, 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 bam. So those these guys are feels. You have syncopated notes, etc. And in this part, you start to have another voice.
So another cool thing you can do with your staccatos is adding more voices to harmonize them. And then this pam 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 is a clear, way to end this statement. And after this pam 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 pam, the pattern changes to this one. So whenever you have a repetition or a break, a good thing you need to ask yourself is, how can I end this? What feel can I use here to make it clear to the listener that something is about to change? And if you have feels every time in as many instruments as possible, and if those feels synchronize between each other, if they chain up together between each other, that's gonna give you a great sound. So for example, if you listen to the strings and actually if you listen to all the orchestra in this part, even if I remove the percussion, you're gonna hear. Sorry, in this part, it was. No, this part. Okay, sorry. So that pam 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 pam, you hear it on the brass as well and on the choir as well. But again, it's not like it's multiple voices. So there's pam 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 pam, and there's also pam 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 pam. But it's the same rhythm, right? And there's also that same thing on women choir. And it really helps the choir stand out a bit more because that's that's the instrument that soars on top of everything, but it's like backed by brass and strings. And it's a very great feel done with staccatos that brings both a sense of rhythm, but also a sense of melody. So that together creates a nice energy. And I wouldn't be surprised if I did a similar rhythm on percussion here, but I think I didn't. It's a bit different, but it's similar. They chain up together nicely. So, when you create your feels, do them in a way where they sync together nicely. Which is the same thing I did here at the end. So in this passage, for example, let's check out what the brass is doing. So it's like bam. Sorry. It's like bam ba 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 bam ba 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 bam. We have that sort of pattern. We also have it on strings, and that's a very great, it's a great pattern. Between sustained notes and short notes. And the choir is doing the same. And the percussion too. So, that's a great feel because we have everything, playing together, etc., syncing up nicely on those accents and those, short notes. So yeah, rhythm is like it's an entire cosmos. Like there's so many things that could be said about rhythm, but the more you can make the whole the rhythm chain up throughout all the different instruments, the more feels you can add, the more syncopated notes, the more details, rhythmically speaking, differences in velocities you can add to your song, the more alive it's gonna sound. And the reason why so many songs sound dead in the beginning when you're a beginner, the reason why is that you don't think about these things. Like we don't do as beginners. But once you really start to take care of them, that is gonna convert to a very great sounding song. Okay, fourth tip is do not be afraid to use both light and dark. And with that, in terms of minor chords and major chords, as I showed you before, when you have a major chord over a melody, it makes it sound happy. When you have a minor chord, it makes it sound kind of weird. There's also way more chords than just major and minor. There's augmented, diminished, sus chords, like 7 chords and all those things that you really get a solid grasp with music theory. I didn't study music theory, so it's kind of weird for me to talk about these things because while I instinctively, I kind of know how they work, I still, I don't have the technical language to explain it to you in a very concise way. So surely this is going to sound weird, and I'm surely going to make another tutorial later on when I will have a more solid understanding of this thing, light and dark. But basically, in my mind, I just split chords into big groups, happy chords and sad chords. That's stupid as hell to think about chords that way, I know, but that's what I do. But basically, having both happy and sad is a great thing, even in a happy song. Now, when you write a happy song, you want to use a major scale, so that you have more happy chords at your disposal. But you're still gonna have some sad, chords in a major scale, and you also want to make use of those. Because if you have a happy song and then you create a very, some glimmers of sadness in between some moments, that creates discord and tension, right? You feel like that, you feel like when you hear a sad chord in a song, you feel like, okay, the song cannot end here. There must be something more, because this is sad. This doesn't make sense. And as an example, check out these chords at the end of this song. So what is happening here is that first thing in this part, in this finale, the track, I wasn't aware of it, just realized it now. I modulated the track to D major. So the track for the most part was in C major. In this part, it's in D major. Probably, yeah, I think I changed the tonality here in this passage. But yeah, here it's in D major. And in a grand finale, in an orchestral grand finale, usually what you have is the composer ending the track with a chord or a note that represents the tonality or scale of the track in that moment. Now we're in D major, and it feels relieving when you hear this. And this is like a D major chord on the span of many instruments, and this pretty much. Which is the tonality again. That's why it feels so much relieving. But the true reason why this final D major sounds so relieving is in the chords that come before and in the voicings of such chords. Basically, what I did here is I pretty much played with the listener's expectation, made him sit on the edge of the seat like, oh my God, please release me. What is happening? And you create that in a happy track by using darkness. That creates tension, that creates expectation that the track is going to carry on, because it cannot end on a dark note. So with darkness, I mean this chord, for example. It's definitely not a D major chord. And it's not major either. It sounds very minor. It's like, what the hell? It sounds very dark, So taken alone, it's like, no, this is wrong. There must be something else. It creates that expectation, that question, that tension. So using minor chords that way can really help. Now, the chord that comes after that is still a bit dark, I'm not sure which chord it is, because there are so many voices and stuff like that. But it just creates that expectation again. It's like, oh, it's a bit better than before, but we're still not there, Subliminally speaking, the listener, the harmony is in D major. And you really feel with this chord in this context that it's not correct. So when the D major really comes, you're like, oh, finally, right? It's like, nope, not quite. Yes, this is what I was looking for. Like, nah, you're like, finally, I can this sounds coherent. So this is good example of why you can play with how you can play with dark and light, have a bit of not dissonances but minor sounding stuff in a major happy context, and then you finally deliver the happiness. But what I did to carry this even further is I have this thing going on in the French horn and bassoon. So we have the final D chord, right? D major chord, but I also have this. And again, this da 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 da, this na, it's like this is not major. It's not, because I added that na, that A sharp A sharp that just doesn't make this completely, bright. So again, it wants, even if we're in D major, since I added that A sharp note, it's like, it's like I did this, and you're like, that's not correct. So again, I'm just playing with the anticipation, just playing with darkness by adding some notes. I think this is like an augmented D chord, I think. And since I have that, now I still have the tension going on, and then I can finally resolve to a pure D major. So this is what happens in the mind of the listener. He listens to this part and like, nope, not quite. Yes. Oh wait, no, something's wrong. Okay, everything is great. So it's like this emotional journey in just like 4 chords. And that's why this part is so effective. 2 more things I should add is that these chords you just heard might not be in their, natural shape. They might be like inverted and all those things because I orchestrated them throughout like many different octaves, many different instruments. So don't be afraid to invert your chords, but always make sure that the dominant tone is the one you like. So because if you do inversions, and if you orchestrate those inversions, you can end up with a D major chord that has a way more dominant F sharp than D. So you have this D major with an F sharp dominance. It's like, what the hell? So if you want that, that's great. But if you don't want that, then you need to really check your orchestration in such a way that you're sure that the D is the most dominant note. And I really paid attention to that here at the end because I wanted like this to scream it D, because that's the note. And also, another thing I did to carry the tension a bit further, even that last, note, is this. And this is almost unhearable. I'm not sure if I should have mixed this a bit louder. It's actually something I really liked in this song, but underneath that chord, we have this. So it's a layer of celesta, piano, and flute, and glockenspiel that is playing this. Sorry. We have 2 voices, like this. And this. Dun, da, 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 dun, da, 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 dun. And the cool thing is that they get slower, it's like initially it's very, very fast notes and then they get, slower and slower, but it keeps on going on together with the French horn, etc. So it really helps, in my mind at least, to carry on, like to carry the energy on and make everything slow down a bit more and stuff. Like it just creates movement. Another good example of a movement might be in this part. So you have obviously the French horn and the choir soaring on top of everything. The bum 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 bum. But what is creating even more movement, in my opinion, are the first violins, or second. I don't remember which one they were. The violins are playing this though. Yeah, it was the first violins. So this. This thing kind of like, it's like in between the vastness of it all, there's this very little voice playing that movement there, and we also have it as something similar on Celesta and Concert Harp. And this has nothing to do with light and dark, it's just movement. In between those big brass and big strings and etc., you still have these little movements inside that, And it really helps. If I were to take away the second violins, and constant harps and everything. And also the trumpets. I will have this. Which, I mean, it still works. It's still the main thing that we want to hear, right? But when we have that main thing accompanied by subtle movements by other instruments, it just soars more. It's like more, it's even more overwhelming. So the more you can think of those things, the more details, the more movements, etc. you can add to your song, the better it's going to sound, and the more you're going to overwhelm the listener with emotions. Now, all those details that you add need to be in key and fit in your harmony. But yeah, if you add those, it's just gonna sound amazing. And those are things that I didn't really like. They just came as I composed, or maybe they came while I was in the shower in between, composing, sessions for this song and stuff like that. So it's just things that you really start to think about. But the more you write music. But what I wanted to do is, again, listen to lots of pop music and really pay attention to all the instrumentation, all the single details that you can find in a song. You're going to realize there are so many things that you could be doing that you're not doing right now. And you're like, there are simple things like this arpeggio here. It's very simple. But maybe you didn't think about adding them just because you didn't care about the details. But now you know you need to care about the details, and you need to really pay attention to those while you listen to other people's music. And you need to, while you compose music yourself, ask yourself what details you can add there. So that's what I want you to do. Now, again, the 4 pillars are: first, have simple melodies, easy to remember. Second, have lots of details in your orchestration, use articulation, feel the holes and stuff like that. Third, have great energy, which means have nice rhythms, nice feels and all those things. And fourth, have a great balance between dark and light. And also have movement in your instrumentation. Now, that encompasses a lot of things. There's many things about orchestration I didn't talk about that you can find out about on my channel. So go on my channel, check out the rest of the tutorials. There's loads of them. If you're new here, check them out. There must be 100 now, and every one of them is valuable. And also, if you're clueless about many things we talk about in terms of music theory, major chords, minor chords, and all those things, if that confused you, you shouldn't be ashamed, because we all start somewhere. And the website I recommend you to check out, other than musictheory.net, is called Skillshare. Basically, it's a platform where there's like video courses about anything, photography, music, culinary arts, web development, and all those things. And there's lots of courses about music theory. A series of such courses is called Music Theory for Electronic Music Producers from Jason Allen. This is a course I highly recommend you because it explains music theory with MIDI. That can really help you if you're a music producer who is not used to reading sheet music. Now, you can access Skillshare from the link in the description of my video. If you go through that link, you're gonna get 2 free months to Skillshare Premium, which is gonna allow you to check out all the Skillshare courses on your desktop computer, or on your phone, on tablet, whatever. So I highly recommend you to check out this website for everything music and all the other things as well. If you want to learn any skill, Skillshare is amazing for that. So that is all for this video. If you want to give me a hand, share it with your friends who might earn value out of it. Leave a comment, leave a like, and let me know what you thought about it. If you have questions, let me know in the comments of this video. And as usual, I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye.